Hello, my name is Maria. I have a lot of thoughts. Most of those thoughts are about literature, and it's midnight, so here are my midnight thoughts about literature. I've had an interesting experience today where I realized why I have been feeling a little agitated and beside myself for the past days. I've just been drained and didn't really know where it was coming from. And then today I realized that it has been 2 weeks since I've sat down with a book for an extended period of time and just let myself get roped into a story. It's just been too long, and I needed to soothe my heart with the medicine of words and bathe in the minds of people more intelligent than me. So when I realized that, I decided to throw over my plans for the day, grab a book, and go to my favorite cafe to read it. And that's exactly what I did. I took Animal Farm with me by George Orwell. I've actually never read this book. I know a lot of Europeans have to read it in school. I didn't. And I sat there for an entire afternoon with a coffee and devoured half of the book in one sitting. And let me tell you, it was a glorious experience. The other thing that happened is that this experience made me realize why I love reading so much. I mean, I guess I did already know why I love reading, but the idea just got a little bit more refined. And that's what I want to talk about. I do want to tread carefully, though, because I have no intention of demystifying the act of reading through a video or some oversimplified statements. I have so much respect for what is going on when we read. To me, it's one of the biggest mysteries of life is that we can stare at black ink on a white background and we hallucinate things that potentially change our lives. And that brings so much wonder into my life, even though I study literature, right? This is my bread and butter, to work with texts and to figure out what is going on there. But still, it hasn't become 1% less mysterious. So anyways, back to my experience of reading this book and the insights I had. Namely that I think what a really good book does is it takes concepts and truths from life that are relevant to communicate with others, and it packages them up in a fictional story, hands it over to another person in form of a book, and that person, by reading an untrue story, can decode the underlying message in such a way that they can understand the concept and it changes their life in some way. I feel like that was a very abstract sentence. So I think there's meaning that the author conveys that we can absorb much better because it is a fictional story, weirdly enough, than we could absorb it if someone would just tell us the truth straight, right? It's like that Emily Dickinson poem, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." Success in circuit lies. And a really good book is just able to hit the nail on the head so hard, but deliver it in an indirect way where, because it is a story and because you live in that world, you remember it without having to remember it. You know it, right? It's in your flesh. And that's what I felt with this book today. It's been so perfect to read it because, I don't know a lot about politics. It's really not a domain that I'm very interested in or good in or anything. But I feel like I know what I need to know about politics because I read Animal Farm. And what it teaches me about politics is how people are wired, and that whatever political situation any country might be in, is not really a matter of exchanging the politicians for another politician, but it is a matter of understanding the psyches of humans. Like there is a deeper root cause, a psychological system underlying whatever is going on that needs to be addressed first. And what makes that so uncomfortable is that we would have to all admit that we're wired that way as well. You know, I very firmly believe that people are doing the best they can in whatever situation. And what makes that truth so uncomfortable is that it is a truth that we all share. You know, we're all wired like the pigs in Animal Farm to an extent. But I think that we're not going to get anywhere with changing the world for the better if we can't collectively acknowledge that that's what's going on within every human being. You know, we need that starting point of admitting. Like, we need a moment of humility and a stepping back from all the craziness of history to just realize that there is an underlying mechanic that needs to be addressed. And honestly, that is the effect that books have on me. It's actually really uncomfortable to read sometimes, like reading Animal Farm, but also reading Madame Bovary, for example. You know, I cannot deny the fact that those ways of thinking are alive inside of me. And as someone who values truth, I appreciate that. It's not always comfortable, but I really appreciate it. And on the topic of truth, actually, I think if you're a naturally curious person like me, you probably value truth very highly. And I want to figure things out. You know, I want to know why we live, why we all have this really unexplainable experience, and I want to find out the underlying meaning and pattern of things. Like, I need to figure out patterns, like I need to breathe. And literature has given me the most wonderful vehicle to do that, because if you value truth very highly, then there's different routes you can take to find truth, right? And I think two of the most popular ones are science and religion. And neither of those have particularly resonated with me in the past. I find science beautiful in its essence, but the way that it is practiced, it often misses the most important questions, I think. Religion just demands too much belief from me. I don't really like the feeling of being required to believe something. I would much rather base my understanding on direct experience. And just in general, with both science and religion, I just see so many pitfalls. Like, to me, those fields are minefields. So I don't have the stamina to navigate around these. Like, science and religion, they don't work for me. They don't work for me as a way to explain the world. They can inform, and I'm very curious about them in a way, but they're not a model that really, as I said, serves as a vehicle for truth. And the reason why I value truth so highly is because I think finding out what's true is the only way to change the world for the better. Like, the state that the world is in collectively, but also every person individually, we need to change. We need we need to help one another. We need to make better decisions. And I think truth, finding out what is true, is just the only fertile soil from which those better actions will be born. And that to me is exactly what a good book does. It forces me directly to not close my eyes to the reality of this experience, to the difficulties. And again, it's so painful, but I think that's the only hope that we have. And that the self-awareness that reading books affords us to cultivate is the seed of very powerful change. It puts us into a purely mental state, which is actually a Proustian idea, where we can put these puzzle pieces together. I'll read you the quote. And once the novelist has put us in that state in which, as in all purely mental states, every emotion is multiplied tenfold, in which his book will disturb us, as might a dream, but a dream more lucid than those we have while sleeping, and whose memory will last longer, then see how, for the space of an hour, he sets loose in us all possible happinesses and all possible unhappinesses, just a few of which we would spend years of our lives coming to know, and the most intense of which would never be revealed to us, because the slowness with which they occur prevents us from perceiving them. And so on and so on. I mean, of course, empathy is a big one. I think they did studies. I once read in a Johan Hari book that they did studies on people who read, and they could clearly pinpoint that reading fiction increases people's empathy, whereas nonfiction doesn't have the same effect. And, you know, empathy, being able to feel with another person, being able to feel all that there is really the basis of compassionate action, right? That change that I was talking about. So I read because in a very real way, reading changes my life. It forces me to. And it's that paradox, you know, where fiction is a lie that leads to the truth, which is just one of the many wonderful paradoxes you can discover if you read a lot. And I think that the ability to live with paradoxes is one of those very important steps towards figuring out what is true. So yeah, truth and empathy are what I get out of reading. That's why I do it. That's why it resonates with me. That's why it's my vehicle to figuring out this life. I'm just thinking about that Harold Bloom quote. I once heard an interview of his, and I think he said, if we don't read deeply, and if we don't read the best that has been written, we don't learn how to think. And if we don't know how to think, we get something like Trump. You know, fascism comes from ignorance. I think that's pretty much what he said. And that sums it up so beautifully. I think if we want to have any hope of changing the world for the better, we need to know how to think. We need to learn how to think deeply, because the issues of this world are very complex, and we need to be able to empathize with people. And that in itself is a wonderful reason to read. So I'm gonna go to bed now and probably finish Animal Farm. I'd love to hear your thoughts on reading if you have any. Thank you for watching this video. Bye bye.